Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Heart of the Cast. And this week's episode is a mix of evergreen topics as well as the upcoming Forbidden Limitless, which is potentially right around the corner. We're going to be talking
surely.
any day now, any day. So we're going to be looking through a couple of subjects here. We're going to give a brief little rundown of the history of the ban list, how it's changed over the period of time. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the concept of a ban list, like what is the purpose behind it, what role is it supposed to fulfill in the game, that kind of thing. And then from there, we'll probably get a little bit more specific. We'll be talking about, of course, fire. How do we hit the new fire deck? The elephant in the room. Is there anything else that we need to hit? Should we be hitting specific individual cards from outside of archetypes? We'll be talking about floodgates, hand traps, you know the usual.
Yes.
And then we'll also, of course, be discussing which cards can come back, what we would like to see return. So, I guess you may take it right away and tell us a little bit about the history of the ban list and its origins.
I mean, I guess this kind of goes hand in hand with what the concept of the ban list is, right? It is our way of balancing the game, since Yu-Gi-Oh is one of the few card games, at least to my knowledge, from the long-term existing card games that just doesn't have a rotation, right? And so like there's two ways you can get people to play with your new cards that you're releasing and designing, and that is you can either make more powerful cards, or you can ban or limit or semi-limit some of the cards that are being played very often to make room for new stuff, essentially, right? And so what we've been experiencing since this game has started, essentially, is a mix of both, right? We've regular ban list updates paired with, of course, like a steady sort of like what people refer to as power creep, which leads to, usually you have to stay up to date and play newer stuff to be competitive in this game, right?
I was just trying to bring up the Forbidden Limitless on the official Konami website, because they actually have a list of like chronological ban lists from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I was trying to find the very first one, but I don't know if it's been changed or something, but they used to have the very first ban list up there.
I couldn't tell you what was on the very first ban list either. That'd be interesting to look at. I know that in the very early days, they would often hit some of the most notorious early ban list hits is like you would have a lot of these kind of power staple cards be limited, right? Like almost every powerful staple card that you can think of early Yu-Gi-Oh has been limited at some point for the most part of its relevance. You go through literally all of them. And then early Yu-Gi-Oh formats just sometimes that card is banned, sometimes that card is at 1, and so on and so forth. Like Mirror Force Torrential, Pot of Greed, Grace Duo, Snatch Steal, Blackluster Soldier, all those cards, right? Like sometimes at 1, sometimes limited, sometimes banned, never at 3. I mean, for very short periods of times maybe, but
so a couple of the first hits actually were the Forbidden One pieces, were the first limited cards. So they are one of the most like broken tier 0 decks in the history of this game, funnily enough, that some people might not know, was OCG Exodia, where you could play multiples of the pieces, and you could go Graceful Charity, draw Sangan Witch, discard Sangan Witch, and search.
That's the biggest difference, is because Sangan and Witch wouldn't have to be sent from the field to the graveyard. That's why that deck was just like absurd. But I think are the Exodia pieces the cards that have been limited for the longest time? Probably, right?
Yeah, they were the first limitations, and I don't think they've changed ever
they've never changed, yeah. So, like, by default, like, there can't be one. Is there another card that's been limited at the same time and never come off the ban list? I don't think so.
I don't know about limited, but I do know that one of the longest banned cards ever was BLS, and then more recently, it was Yatagarasu.
Wait, the BLS?
BLS was banned for, like, close to 10 years, and then Yata was, like...
BLS was banned
last year or something.
When was BLS unbanned?
2013 or something like that. Something like that. I don't remember exactly.
It must be 2012.
But the longest one is Yatagarasu, as a fun bit of trivia. So
yeah, but like, how is BLS? Because it's legal in GOAT, right?
Yeah.
So that's 2005. And then it comes back in like 2011 Tengu Plant. Yeah, 2011 Tengu Plant.
6-7 years. That's a while. So yeah, this game has had a lot of prisoners
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah.
And for your information, one of the points that a lot of people don't realize and sometimes forget because, well, it's been a long time, but the Forbidden Limited License in Yu-Gi-Oh! Well, first of all, I should probably preface the products in Yu-Gi-Oh! The release dates have always been different between TCG and OCG.
Mhm.
They've generally gotten things before us and earlier than us. But bizarrely, we always used to run the same Forbidden Limited list alongside each other.
That is just such a that is one of those facts that about Yu-Gi-Oh's history that if you tell them to someone today, they might not even believe you because of how ridiculous it sounds. There's a couple of things like that, like priority and that kind of stuff. There's a couple things when you tell them, you know, back in my day, this is how it used to be. They won't believe you. They because it just makes no sense. Like this game operated on like a 3, 4, 5 months separated schedule of releases, and we still had the exact same banlist hits at the same time.
Yeah, it wasn't uncommon for cards to be released at specific limitations in the TCG just because OCG had it hit first. Some notorious examples of that is Gores, I think, came to the TCG Limited.
Tons of cards, tons of cards.
Rooster came, I think Temple of the Kings came.
Rooster died before we got it.
Was it banned?
It wasn't banned, but the deck was unplayable before we got it because like you would never touch that deck with one, I think, and it had its time in the OCG. It was part of the meta. They limited it to regulate it, and then when it came out for us, it was just like dead.
Wow. I can't think if anything's been released banned in TCG, like printed in a product as banned. I feel like I think it's Temple of the Kings.
There is something. I'm pretty sure there is something.
I did a video on this specifically, so I should remember, but I am pretty 90% sure it was Temple of the Kings was banned, like in release. Like we had a product where you could open a card and open your pack in the card. It was just banned. Like that's pretty funny. Sixth Sense is one of those as well.
No, Sixth Sense was limited.
Yeah,
that's lots of which is even crazier. That card should have been banned when it came out, but.
Yeah, so there isn't really much to talk about the history of the ban list unless we want to get into like each individual one or specific thing. So we won't.
I guess what you mentioned makes sense. Like it makes sense to mention that I think we got that we got our own ban list in the TCG around 2014, I believe was the year.
Dragon Ruler was the split 2013.
April 2014.
I think it was the 2013 September list.
Oh, okay. Somewhere around that time. I think it was somewhere during Dragon Ruler format is when we finally got our own ban list, which made a lot more sense because obviously, you know, that's if you operate like a couple months apart, that makes a lot of sense. And nowadays, obviously, the biggest difference between the two ban lists is that for some reason the OCG follows the philosophy that Maxi is okay, and the TCG follows the philosophy that it should be banned. There's other differences, but that is, I think, the biggest one. You can't really emphasize how big that difference is, but yeah.
As a side note, I think it's very bizarre at Worlds they combine both of them because it's like it just creates this like completely imaginary format.
Yeah, it's
I don't know what the alternative would be.
Pretty big downside of having two separate formats is that they try to unify them at Worlds. The way they do it does make sense. I don't think they have a better way of doing it for the World Championships, but it still creates this kind of tournament that isn't really relevant for anyone outside of the actual competitors, right? Like you preparing for the World Championship, you have a hard time. Like you can't really go to tournaments and try your stuff out because it's a completely different format, and you don't have people to really test with that are engaged in the format the same way that you are. But yeah, it really only matters to the people playing the World Championships. Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, and in an ideal world, I feel like the product should be lined up with all the regions. I don't know. I just feel like that makes sense, but that's a whole nother.
I feel like that's a whole nother podcast right there. Yeah. But I do agree. I think it has some positives, right? For example, that we get to see what we get. We are basically better prepared for what's releasing, but at the same time, it takes away a lot of excitement. It allows them to make the cards that they know are going to be popular, higher rarities, and all that kind of stuff. I think overall it'd be much cooler if we just had the same format, you know, like it'd be really cool to be able to exchange as well with people from the OCG and then maybe test with them together or something like that, you know, see different perspectives, but it's just a different format. So it's kind of weird.
We'll start a petition and we'll start a campaign. So hashtag global release. We'll get it one day, guys. Hashtag global release.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about the concept of a ban list.
Yeah.
Why does it exist? What is the purpose of it? Do we
Yeah.
need it, etc., etc.? So, I think from a game design perspective, a ban list is there specifically to, well, balance the game and rein in any problem cards, bring in anything that seems like it could be a bit too powerful, but also allow cards after X amount of time to return once
Hmm.
they've been I suppose in the jail for a long enough time. Look at,
Yeah.
for example, the Dragon Rulers in Macedon. So I think that's realistically the purpose. But I think the big question, Mr. Schmidt, is have they achieved that?
I mean, I think it is fundamentally true that no game, like I'm not aware of any trading card game that doesn't have any mechanism to sort of regulate the card pool after a certain amount of time, because it's natural. It's trading card games. They need to be releasing product over time. They need to make money with it. They need to make sure people are interested in the new cards rather than just buying cards once and then never buying cards again. And so there's a couple different ways you can achieve that. One of them is the ban list, others is rotations. I don't want to get into too much detail. I think the main thing that people are forgetting, or that I also sometimes forget when I make ban list predictions or ban list discussions or whatever, is I always only look at it from what is the healthiest thing for the game, right? And then what I sometimes forget is that at the end of the day, it's essentially a marketing tool, right? It's essentially the same way rotation, all these things that are being like, okay, this is a for the health of the game or whatever, game balancing. It's really just to be able to sell the new cards that you release, right? Like you make it so like cards are only playable for a certain amount of time. Whether you do that for by banning a certain card and making a deck not viable, or whether you straight up rotate the deck out, I don't think there's that big of a difference in the principle, because the principle is always have people stop play the old cards, make them play the new cards, right? I do think
Well,
there is a lot of ways you can find a good middle ground where you can use a ban list to balance your game in a healthy way and make it so that people like the game, want to pick up the new stuff without completely like butchering other stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's
that's
good
the thing,
examples
though.
and bad examples, I feel like.
I really hate that you're right. But unfortunately, like people do forget that in the end, this is a business that's trying to make money, and
Well,
so I think for their perspective, it is always the primary goal is okay. Well, how is this going to help upcoming products for the next quarter or wherever the ban lists get released, which is usually every 4 months.
at the
Um,
same time, you kind of need to do both. You can't just release a ban list every time that like kills everything and makes it so everyone has to buy all the new stuff, right? If you just like literally like do that every single time, like completely destroy what the people have invested in and make them force them to buy the new stuff, I don't think that's a sustainable model either, because then people are just going to
well,
be sick and tired.
rotation wants to know your location. So.
Well, but what you see in rotation games is that, at least from my knowledge, is that the card prices for that format, the amount of money that people are willing to invest for the decks in those kind of formats are significantly lower. And I don't know if that translates to the sales and all that kind of stuff, but like, it has other benefits though. At the same time, if you have a rotation, you have a guarantee that the cards are going to be legal for 2 to 3 years or whatever the cycle is, right? In Yu-Gi-Oh, you don't have that. Sometimes the life cycle of a card you buy is longer than 2 years. Sometimes the cycle of a card that you buy is literally 4 months.
Hell, even less than that. I mean, we saw
Right.
what happened with Super Heavy Samurai, for example. I
Yeah.
think was one of the shortest lived meta decks. Thankfully, that deck wasn't actually too expensive, I believe.
I mean, I think that's why they did it. I think that's legitimately the reason why they made those cards commons in that set, and the Wakaushi was a super rare, I think. I think that was because they knew, hey, we can't make these guys like high rarity and then ban them 2 weeks later. And because they knew they wanted to get rid of it for the sake of the health of the game, they were like, yeah, we just have to make these low rarity. Otherwise, people are going to be mad.
So I think one of the biggest divides on this specific subject specifically is probably should have mentioned it a little bit earlier with regards to the history of the ban list, but the ban list, for those who might not be initiated, at least I think it was pre-COVID, were way less frequent. It
Hmm.
wasn't until I think 2018 or maybe 2020, something like that, where
Yeah.
Banlist became every 4 months, roughly. You know,
I mean,
as you
you
see on the
say
website, it
roughly, but
says.
there was a time where there was set dates for Banlist, right? Maybe we should talk about that for a second as well.
Yeah,
Um,
so previously around about like, all the way up until like that time, you used to get a set list and it would a set date. Well, something of a set date, the list would say specifically would what was the exact wording on the website? It would say something like no sooner than
no,
X
that's
date.
that's the middle history. The
Oh, that's the
original
middle history.
originally it was just, I believe,
There
twice
was
a year.
expiry dates, right?
No, it
Yeah,
was
so it was
it
every
was a
six
set
months.
date. It was always the same date.
Oh wow, okay.
I
Yeah,
believe it
that must
was
have stopped
I
in
think it was
2013.
1st of March and 1st of September every 6 months.
March, September ban lists for
Yeah.
the longest period of time in Yu-Gi-Oh. So every 6 months you would get a list here, and it was
Yeah.
set,
Yeah.
and it was very specific. So I think that's really interesting because we used to talk about. I mean, it's always one of those rose tinted goggles in hindsight in 2020. But I remember at the time, like when they was so long, people would just be like, "Oh, it's just taking forever. Like
Oh
this
yeah.
format is
Yeah.
stale. Like this is awful."
Hmm.
But then, like a little bit later, you're like, "Oh wow! I mean, it would be great if we weren't going to have a ban list because there's a new product coming out and there's a new deck coming out that's going to shake up the meta. So we don't really need a ban list, etc., etc." So there's like, I guess, two different approaches and ways to look at it.
I think there's like a lot of pros and cons to either of these systems, but it's definitely true that like forcing yourself to have it be 6 months every time is also just, it has way too many negative effects, I feel like, because what happens if something ends up being problematic? Like what if you just had a ban list and then a set comes out that drops a card that you didn't intend to be like super broken, but now it is, right? And now are you
Now you're gonna
expecting
sit in there for
people?
5 months.
Yeah, are you expecting people to sit there for 5 months? And we did have something called emergency ban lists every once in a while, where if something like this would happen, they would just be like, yeah, we need to do.
Adjusted list,
Yeah.
actually.
Okay.
So that was that was 2015. Notoriously was
No, there's
the
like I'm talking actual Yu-Gi-Oh history here. Like this is like 2008 kind of stuff that I'm talking about.
oh, okay. Please, Grandpa, tell us about the 2008 emergency ban list. What
I'm
was
pretty
on it?
sure there was the one that it banned like Dimension Fusion from like the Diamond
That
Dude
is true.
Turbo.
That is true, actually. Yeah.
The Stratos one, yeah, that one. That one was called Emergency Ban List. So don't nudge me on that.
Oh, damn. Okay, noted.
Don't cite the dark magic to me, which I was there when it was written.
Well, more recently that I remember, for context, I did start playing in 2013, so I do recall this quite vividly. Was the adjusted list of 2015, which was probably the shortest, at least in the history of this time span, was 2015, 13 days after the release of Breakers
Oh
of
yeah.
Shadow. Yes, literally 13 days after the release of this set. Konami dropped an adjusted list, which hit a bunch of Performapal Performage cards.
Yeah.
So I think they emergency banned, was it Plushfire? Or did they limit it or something?
Maybe no, I don't. I think Plushfire was legal for longer than that.
Okay, it was some of the it was always like some of the lower rarity ones and stuff like this.
Yeah.
I think is really realistically.
But in
like
general, it's worth pointing out that I think they eventually came to the conclusion that like having the ban list be always be too far apart just doesn't give you enough control over what is happening, because sometimes maybe they're not aware of how powerful a card is that they're publishing, or maybe they sometimes, I'm sure purposely, they want to make something really, really powerful because of like, sales reasons, lore reasons, or whatever. And then they need a way to tone it down without having everyone be, in troll despair for 5 months before they can actually do something about it, which is one of the few things that I really like about Master Duel's ban list system, where we basically get updates a lot more frequently, like almost once a month, I feel like. And so
it is.
we get like smaller changes overall. The quality of the actual changes is something I don't want to get into too much detail because I'm going to be very sad. But like the concept behind like you have more regular updates with smaller changes, I feel like is cooler, because then you don't have to like deal with a deck. Like you don't have to kill a deck immediately. You can like test one or two small changes to it, have people play with the little bit watered down version for another month, see if it's still a problem. If it still is, you can do some more hits to it and so on and so forth. I think that is cool. As
Yeah, so
opposed to limiting to
there's,
like half a year.
there's like two major ways to look at it, right? There's like it's all really to do with frequency. I kind of disagree. I actually don't think I like the frequent Macedon ones. I think for a
Okay.
while it was always funny and entertaining because it's more content.
Mm-hmm.
But I think 4 months about ish is actually kind of a sweet spot. And the reason for that is I just feel like whenever there's like a new deck or something to come out, they kind of get pigeonholed in this weird situation where it's like, okay, here's like a brand new like tier 0 deck, and it's like, okay, there's a ban list month later. What are you gonna do? Are you gonna hit it? They're not going to do that, right? We know they're not gonna do that because like product and all that kind of stuff. So I think like letting the format develop a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, usually, that degenerates into like meta versus anti-meta decks, as we've seen in the TCG currently. But I think just giving the players a little bit of that breathing room for a few
Mm-hmm.
months to really develop the formats, because usually, like I think, like if you specifically look at the calendar of YCSs, it's kind of good when like you have like a good solid amount of YCSs per event, rather than if it was monthly ban lists, there might even be situations where we just don't get a YCS.
I mean, I'm
with
not
that
saying it
format.
has to be 1 month, but like, don't you think that
Just
that would
like
maybe
6 weeks ish, 4 to 6 weeks.
don't you think that that would somewhat not be an issue? Like, I feel like what you're saying, some of it is like more of an issue with larger like distances between ban lists, because if they now, for example, are in the predicament that we're going to talk about in a second of like, do they hit the fire deck already because it's really, really dominant, but it's also relatively new and super expensive? If they do hit it very hard, people are going to be kind of mad because it's just came out and people invested into it. If they don't hit it hard enough, we're stuck with it for like 3, 4, 5 months, as opposed to if we had a smaller smaller cycle, they could maybe
But
hit
that's
it
the thing.
only
I
slightly.
think 3-4 months is probably fine, right?
Is it
For a
you,
tier
you
0
think
deck's
it's fine if they hit Snake Eyes like almost not at all, and then it's around for another 3-4 months?
Yeah, I would say so, right?
I think people would lose their mind.
Well, that's what's going on, right?
I mean, yeah, people are already losing their mind.
But here's the problem, right? It's like, what's the alternative? You want to make it more frequent, but like now they have this really paradoxical situation where, like, what are we gonna do? Hit cards that just came out, like potentially 3 to like 5 weeks ago?
I mean, they
Right,
could just say like, hey, we have another ban list coming up in like 2 months anyways. We're just going to limit Snake Eye Ash, see if that like does it, or like whatever. I'm sure the deck is still viable, but it does make it less obnoxious. So we limit like Snake Eye Ash or whatever, or limits like another card from it and let it be like a tier, still a very powerful deck, but more manageable, right? And then like people can look forward to in 2 months, when if it still is dominant, we can hit it more, right?
So I think what this really seems to come down to fundamentally is like the power of the cards that are being released. At least recently, or like before recently, whenever there would be like such an egregious like deck, like for example Tearlament, or for example Snake Eye, that was so dominant, you wouldn't really need the ban list to hit them until potentially like a few months later, whenever there was like a new meta deck. But we are in a bit of a, you'd think maybe it's unique. It doesn't really feel like it's unique anymore, where there is a deck that is released that is so powerful and so dominant it needs immediate addressing.
Yeah.
Whereas I think 3-4 month ban list cycles work really well when we aren't in a situation where there's like a super dominant deck. Do you know what I mean?
That is true. However, I mean, we're trying to pinpoint like the weaknesses of the current system, right? And that is one of them. Is like, if there is a deck like this one that is really, really strong, it is kind of weird to say like, yeah, you're gonna have to deal with this for 4 more months, and there's no other alternative. So in this case, I agree with you. In like a regular situation where the decks that they release are like relatively balanced, maybe a little bit better what's already out there, then it's fine. If you just say like, okay, we're gonna hit it a little bit in 3 to 4 months, tone it down a little bit, and like that's fine.
Yeah.
But it definitely, I think it is a kind of a problem what they've maneuvered themselves into with Snake Eyes at the moment. I don't know if we want to talk about that too much already, but I think that's definitely a big downside.
We could definitely go there soon, but I think this goes like, this is sort of the fundamental issue with the ban list, right? What we're talking about earlier with concept. Why does it exist? Is there to balance the game, right? Well, how come decks are being made that are so imbalanced that it kind of throws this system out of whack, right? Like obviously because of all the reasons we mentioned, like profit, marketing, etc., etc. but I feel like it's happening more and more. Where
I do agree that in an ideal world, we do not end up in this situation at all, because the deck of Snake Eyes has definitely been designed a little bit too carelessly. I don't know if they want. That's the thing. We don't know if they wanted this to happen. I don't know if they wanted this to be this powerful, right? I don't know if they were just trying to design a good deck, or if they were trying to design the best deck by a lot, right? That'd be interesting to know. But either
it
way,
feels like they must know, right? Like, there's no way they would like do some R&D testing of Snake Eye or Snake Eye Fire King and think,
you would
yes.
think someone at some point would have sat down and be like, what can I do with one Snake Eye Ash now that we've designed all these cards, you know? Maybe they just didn't see the possibilities of searching Populous and summon it.
My biggest question is when they do make these things, I wonder how they like plan out the timeline of this kind of stuff, right? Because I feel like after the Worlds season, it's easier to make tier 0 decks, which is I think exactly what happened with Tier Limit, right? Because it feels like you're going to get some type of return on investment as a competitive player whenever you spend. But when you release a tier 0 deck in Phantom Nightmare now, it's a very awkward time in the calendar, I feel, because you're starting to approach national season and then Euros and then Worlds. So it's like, I'm just curious from their perspective, like, what do they think the plan is? Because it's like a 6-month gap or something between now and like Worlds, or potentially even the European Championship, which is July.
I mean, the biggest
think, right?
deal
So
is like this is the most active. I would say for like the average, somewhat competitive Yu-Gi-Oh player, right? The next couple months are the most active, right? Because we have regional season leading up to nationals, so people want to qualify for the European Championship or whatever continental championship you're attending. People would be playing YCSs as well if we had any, but that's besides the point for this particular year. But like you have regionals going on. People are trying to get their invites. People are potentially attending YCSs. People are playing in Europe. They're playing their individual national championships, and then we have the continental championships leading up to Worlds. It's like basically the season is the most. It's at its most active point. I feel like in soon, right? The next couple months.
Yes. So what do they do about that, like in terms of its release schedule? Like, do they leave it legal for the entire national season?
That's the thing, right? And that's the situation we're into, because our cycles are relatively long most of the time. I mean, they don't guarantee for us that it's always this long. They always say with the ban list, no sooner than. But I would say if we get a ban list anytime soon, during like March still or April at any point, that's going to be the list that we're using for national season, continental championships, but probably Worlds, and then after that we get another one. So it's a really hard thing to do with this current Fire deck. Do they hit it too hard? Do they not hit it enough? Do they find the exact right balance that makes the majority of people happy? I think it's very, very hard. I think it's one of those ban lists that it's impossible to get it right almost, I feel like.
Yeah, and that's the sort of manufacturing of their own demise. They have literally pigeonholed themselves into a situation where there's just nothing they can really do. They have to like sort of pick a direction and then go with it. Either hit the deck really hard or just ignore it, right? Like they're at a crossroads where they just have to pick like one of these. I don't know what they can possibly do that would balance it. Make it sort of okay.
The theoretical thing that I think they need to do, which in practice, we're going to talk about that in a second, is going to be very hard. But in theory, what they need to do is simply hit Snake Eyes to the point where it falls down to the power level of the other decks in the format. They still want it to be part of the best decks in the game, but not better than the other stuff, right? They want to pull it down to the power level of like the decks that the other people are playing, like the Voiceless Voices, the what else, like whatever you can think of, right? The Brandeds, the whatever other meta decks you have right now that aren't Snake Eyes, right? You don't want to hurt it so bad that it's basically like a rogue deck, or even worse than that. You don't want to leave it more powerful than the other decks. You want to bring it down to make it so we have another format that has like 4, 5, 6 decks at least, right? The problem is Snake Eyes is a super weird candidate for this kind of thing to happen.
So I don't think it's a weird candidate. I think it's a very specific design problem, right? And what you'll notice is it feels like it's something very unique and specific to one card combo decks.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because one card combo decks become very fragile when it
Yeah.
comes to ban lists, right? Because you can't hit one card combos without completely destroying the combo,
Yeah.
right? So that is the problem.
It's
I think
the problem is if you have one Snake Eye card, you have all of them in your hand, essentially. That's the thing. And that's the thing. I think I want to have an episode about one card combo decks in general. Like I think that's worth it. I think we need I need to let that out. But the no, the concept is it's very, very hard to hit. Because I mean, you know, I'm not a fan of so-called consistency hits, right? Which is just for context. I believe there's two ways you can hit a deck. You can either fundamentally hit what it does, or you can hit how often it does it, right? Like, for example, if you go and hit a card like Fire Formation Tanky from 3 to 1, you're not changing what a Tri-Brigade deck does, right? The deck can still do the exact same thing as before, but it does it less often because it's simply going to have access to its Beast Warriors, its Fractal less often, right? As opposed to if you ban a certain card from it, like, I don't know, arbitrary example, you would ban like Shuraig, then the deck would not lose any of its consistency, but it would lose that possibility. Like that, the deck would play differently than before. It wouldn't be less consistent. Or Revolt, which is a card that people asked for being banned for a long time because of that, right? They were like, okay, we don't want this deck to be inconsistent or unfair sometimes. We want this deck to just not have the Revolt at the end of the combo, and then it's fine, right? And so there's sort of like this split. Some people think that consistency hits are fine. Some people think that they should rather hit what a deck does as opposed to how often it does it, which is more what I'm more on the side of I want to change how the deck works rather than win some games against it because it bricked. I don't think that's good gameplay. But yeah.
I think sometimes it can depend on like what the deck actually does. I think depending on what the deck actually does, sometimes a consistency hit is better.
Yeah.
Like for example, I don't know if anyone has strong opinions on like Royal Magical Library Exodia, for example, right? Like I don't think that's, you know, you're not gonna ban like Magical Library because sometimes you'll get FTK'd, right? But at the same time, you know, it's inconsistent enough. And I think a better example would probably be like, remember that explosion FTK during Monarch format?
Magical explosion, like wall of revealing light thingy or whatever, blasting the ruins, or what
No,
it was.
it was a little bit after than that. Well, anyway, basically the point is, it's like, you know, if you have like some kind of silly FTK, is it worth banning like key components and cards of an FTK? Like for example, you know, Blaze Phoenix, Magical Explosion. Do these things really need banned? Well, you could argue yes, because they're always going to be problematic in some type of way. Or are the decks and are consistency problems just kind of enough to deal with it, right?
In the sense of those kind of classic FTK decks that you mentioned that like draw your entire deck and then FTK the opponent in some way, shape, or form, I guess it's true because but the thing is, it's a very extreme example because those decks they only operate based on what are the odds that I FTK, right? And once an FTK deck reaches a certain percentage, like a certain likelihood of FTKing, then it becomes viable, right? And if you just mess with that a little bit, the deck suddenly just doesn't work anymore, right? Like if my FTK deck has a 60% success rate, I'm never going to top a tournament with it because that's just not how it works, right? And so in that example, I guess it's true. But for the most part, I personally, I think consistency hits are, I think a better example of where I was okay with it was when they limited floodgates, which isn't per se a consistency hit to a certain deck. But I just noticed that, you know, I've always been on the side of, you know, these floodgates shouldn't be limited. These floodgates should be banned, if anything. It's not okay to sometimes draw Gozen match, right? If you think that card is too powerful, it should never happen. That was my opinion for the longest time. However, now that they have limited some of these cards, the only thing I'm noticing is that I'm being hit with them way less often. And I like that, you know? So I still think they should be banned, but at least it doesn't happen as often, right? So I'll take it in that sense, right?
I think that's more of a non-engine issue, right? Because I think randomly having to draw things is always going to be harder. Right?
It's not a perfect example, but that was one of the things where the argument of, oh, it's just going to happen less often now, it kind of worked for me because even though I would rather see these cards banned, I would still much rather only have to play against them very rarely than like at 3.
Low key, I'm kind of a fan of something like branded opening to one. Like,
Hmm.
I think that's a pretty cool hit because it's a bit of both, right? It's a power hit in that you don't have to deal with like this really solid like destruction protection effect in
Yeah.
the graveyards
Hmm.
quite consistently. But it's also, obviously a consistency hit because you're just seeing Aliber less often, therefore branded fusion less often. So I think like
Yeah.
middle ground cards like that are sometimes like okay. But
I
yeah, I
do
don't.
think that's fine to an extent because I mean, Bandit Opening was both a starter and also potentially an extender with a bonus effect in the graveyard. So like you're hitting both, like you're kind of getting the best of both worlds there. You're not making the deck unplayable because it still has enough consistency cards, but the deck uh, doesn't have that extension as often, or like for example limiting branded fusion, which they did in Master Duel, I think is also an okay hit because it's not just consistency. The deck has to worry about how do I get my branded fusion back in the grind games, right? And that is an actual thing for branded decks in Master Duel, is like they have to worry about, it's not as simple as normal summon Aluber on the follow-up turn to get another branded fusion or searching it with another like Albion or whatever, right? You have to deal with that, right? You have to deal with that. And also, if you have to search branded fusion, if you have to spend your Aluber on searching that card, you can't search a different card, right? You don't get the branded lost or the branded in red on top of it. So there's definitely ways they can make good consistency hits. They're not all bad, for
I think a
sure.
pretty cool thing about branded fusion to one as well is like people play the deck differently. Like they build it differently, right?
Hmm.
Like you kind of sort of rely on like Saronir dumping and then
Yeah,
Retribution adding back. Like that's kind of, so it fundamentally changes like
yeah.
how you even build a deck. And I think sometimes hits like that are actually really cool and healthy
No,
because
I
you
mean
take a deck.
that is good because that it does hit the deck significantly, and people were not playing those cards before for good reason, right? The deck was better before, and now that you have to make room for those kind of cards, I mean they don't really make room in branded. They just slap them on top and go like 58 cards and then like call it a day. But you get what I'm saying. Like those cards were not in branded for good reason before then.
I'm trying to think of decks historically that were really good meta decks, got significant hits on the ban list, but were still viable, but just in a different way. The first one
Dragon
that came to
rulers,
my mind was Pepe.
dragon rulers.
Dragon Rules, yeah.
They
There you
lost babies, and it was a completely different deck, and it was even better than before, which is funny.
go. um, yeah, I think the first one that comes to my mind was Performapal and Perform Ages. Shout
Hmm.
outs to you for creating that really cool pendulum deck. But yeah, you like completely changed how that deck ran because of all of the Perform Age hits that were quite strong. I think
Yeah.
Dragon Link has gone through like multiple iterations. Tear Lament as well is a deck that has had so many different playstyles. It almost
Yeah.
feels like a control deck nowadays.
I think
In
there's
Macedo
multiple
anyway.
decks like that. Like um I think a majority of the decks that they hit properly without just killing them have kind of worked like this, right? They would just spawn another version of the deck that sometimes, even if the goal was the same, the execution was different. All that kind of stuff. The problem with Snake Eyes specifically, I guess we should get into the current situation because it's just, I guess this is where we start talking about that. It feels like there are a couple hits that the more I think about them, the more sense they make. But for the most part, a deck like this just has like so many cards that do the same thing slightly differently. Like whether you start with Diabellstar or Wanted or Snake Eye Ash or Bonfire, even Poplar is a starter, right? Like I feel like no matter what you touch, it's gonna just be a consistency hit that doesn't make the deck inconsistent enough because the deck is always gonna have more searchers to fall back on. And
Yeah,
so yeah,
I think the problem is like it is. It's like I think whenever a deck, regardless of its opening hand, generally ends on the same end board. I think sometimes that like can be the issue, right? Because then at that point it feels like it doesn't really matter what you hit. You're either killing that or you're letting it live
that
kind of thing.
yeah. I mean, the thing is though, you could imagine them hitting like end board pieces from Snake Eye. Like for example, something that I don't think is going to happen, but if they banned Promethean, right? I think it's too new for that card to be banned. I don't think they will because it also just benefits a lot
Yeah,
of other decks that don't see exposure to it because, like, I mean, everyone's playing Snake Eyes if they're
absolutely
playing a
not
fire deck.
happening. But let cook, sure.
Yeah, but like if they did that, right? Like you the deck stays the same concept. It's still a bunch of 1-card combos. You don't have the Promethean Princess, so you're missing that extension. You don't have that easy way to get back the Flamberge. You just have to cook like a different end board, but then every version of the deck is probably going to end on that end board instead. So it would make the deck just weaker, right? Not less consistent, but weaker. So that in theory is a solid hit, and I do think that is something that eventually they might consider that. But
Let's talk about like individual hits. I think it'd probably be good to go through like some of the community suggestions, right? So we can probably take off the table like some of the things like like Poplar as a best. Like that's just not even worth discussing. We know that's not happening. But we did see some suggestions of hitting some Agov cards, right? So like, what do you think about just hitting like just outright banning Original Sin, for example?
Okay, so I think a lot of the Agov cards are coincidentally also the more interesting ones to talk about, even from a game balancing perspective. I think Original Sinful Spoils, banning it makes, from a game balance perspective, that would be a very, very good hit, I think. My problem with it is I just don't see that happening at the moment. In a way that is like, I think it's too smart for it to happen, if that makes sense. Like, I just think, and the problem is also, I don't know how much they care about stuff like that, but I think like, from a card design, archetype design perspective, right, the Snake Eyes and the Diabellstar cards are meant to work together, and that card connects the two, right? You don't really have another way to... That's the card that connects the two archetypes, right? If that makes sense. And
yeah, so I mean, you're essentially just like killing Fire King. Well, in the Snake Eye sense, right? Because I don't think there really is a way to combine them anymore, right? Because that is the link between them.
You completely disconnect Diabellstar from Snake Eyes, right? Diabellstar just cannot find your Snake Eye cards anymore, is the problem.
Yeah.
It's not just the fact that you can't go into the Fire King cards, it's also just the fact that like Diabellstar just doesn't get you the Snake Eye cards anymore.
And the question is like, I don't know, is Snake Eye playable like that? That is really what it kind of comes down to, right? It has to
still be playable, because you can still play Snake Eye Ash at 3 copies with Bonfire at 3 copies in that scenario, and it still does an incredible amount of stuff. You probably play it as like a normal summon in some other deck that doesn't need its normal summon as much, and you just probably don't play the Diabellstar cards in it at all. You just use like Snake Eyes as insane normal summons, right? But no, I think that is a very interesting hit that I just don't, unfortunately, think it's not realistic. But the theory behind it I like a lot.
I think there's I don't think it's like completely unrealistic, right? I think they have like sometimes hit really powerful cards like that in the past. And I think the biggest issue maybe with that even happening is like, what do you actually do with Wanteds and Diabellstar?
That's the thing, right? That it's those cards have exclusively been used so far because of that card.
That's a genuine question though. Like, what can you actually do?
No, there's like, I mean, they have stuff for it, right? There's this quick play spell card that can potentially act as a board wipe. They have that Omni Negate trap card. Like, the cards aren't terrible. It's just not. I don't know if there's enough reason to even play those cards, and so like you're effectively killing. You're not even killing Snake Eye, you're just killing the Diabellstar card. You're just blanking those cards out of all of the decks, right?
Yeah, you're basically just so it's a fusion of 2 different archetypes that works really well and has incredible synergy, and then like Original Sin is just like you disconnect it completely, and now it isn't even a deck anymore. Well, I mean, it's a deck. You can play Diabellstar, but it's like a whole other different archetype almost.
And maybe you can argue that that'd be a good thing. But I kind of am not sure if that's what Konami wants to do.
Yeah, maybe they're not ready to have that conversation yet.
Yeah, exactly. Like they I don't think they're ready yet to sit down and be like, yeah, this should not have happened.
Let's discuss Flamberge Dragon, because there's a lot of suggestions for banning Flamberge Dragon as the problem cards. It is kind of block dragon. You know, the card is obviously really strong. Is it ban-worthy?
Block dragon.
Is it ban-worthy? I mean, you could argue so, but again, if you ban bans Flamberge, is that bad? Like, I think the deck is still viable, right?
Viable, maybe, but that deck is not top tier anymore. I don't think. I don't think. Like, and I genuinely think that would be one of those hits that in the long run, I could absolutely see that happen. But I think that's one of the things that if they do that now, I think that's almost a little bit too harsh. Because that deck is incredibly expensive, and they basically make, I don't think, useless is the wrong word, but I just don't think it's good anymore, honestly. Like that card, on the one hand, that makes it ban worthy, but like it does so much for this deck that at that point the fundamental question is, are we killing it or are we trying to leave it alive? Because if you want to kill it effectively, banning Flamberge is the way to go.
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to like, what is the intention? Are they okay with this tier 0 deck that they've created becoming playable, but not a meta deck?
Mm-hmm.
That's really what, like, you know, that is the question.
Yeah.
Are they okay with a deck being fine? You know, it's not awful, but it's not meta, right? Like, that's the issue.
Yeah.
So would they be willing to do something like that?
I think they would be too scared of the backlash from the people that have bought the cards right before national seasons. And now it's just not, I mean, maybe you can go to locals with it, but it's just, that's not what the people that paid the money for that deck, they wanted to compete with it, I feel like. And that if
I just really like the Diabell Star lore, actually.
I guess, yeah.
The Witch is really cool.
Yeah.
What do we think about banning the field spell?
So we're getting into very interesting territory here, because those are the kind of hits that don't make the deck not viable. It just changes how the deck plays. And that one of the more interesting things that I've heard is the deck just plays through Nibiru like it's nothing for like a few very specific reasons. And if we were to take that away, that would potentially be very interesting, right? One way of doing that could be to get rid of the field spell, because that is one main way of playing around Nibiru. Another cool thing you could do is actually limiting Flamberge. You only mentioned banning it, but like if you look into the lines for the deck, a lot of the lines, and the reason why people are playing 2 Flamberges is because of Nibiru, right? All of the lines that play around Nibiru, the ones that I'm aware of, unless, well, not all of them, some of them do get like Borload Savage and stuff like that early if you have like Diabell Star access, but majority of the lines go through 2 Flamberge Dragons to play around Nibiru, because you want to have one in your spell and trap zone from the field spell, and you're going to play with one in play, and as soon as you get Nibiru, the other one just hops out of the spell and trap zone and still places your Masquerena and all that kind of stuff, right? And that's how you do that.
I just want to say that, like, conceptually, I'm uncomfortable with the idea of let's hit a deck to make it really susceptible to like a game-ending hand trap.
Oh yeah, no, I get that 100%, but that would be one way to make the deck still function, but not be as dominant. If you like.
But the thing is, I think what that basically says when you do a hit like that is like, okay, everyone, you got to play Nibiru now, right? Whereas now, like, I mean, I guess maybe we're kind of already in that situation, so who knows, right?
I mean, but this is what balanced out some of the older decks that are like that were really, really powerful. You know, some of them just died a nib, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to worry about like Heroes or Salamangreat anymore, because those decks just fundamentally kind of like suck against Nibiru, which is like, I know why that dynamic isn't ideal. I know, but like, it's just like, we need to hit the friggin' Snake Eye deck somehow, right?
Yeah. I think so. Let's do like, I don't know if like prediction is the world. I don't know if you actually did I think you did, and it's
I did, yeah.
A few days ago. I haven't got around to watching it yet. But I'll say that my specific prediction was banning Jet Synchron and limiting Ash. Ash being a low rarity card, and Jet Synchron. I guess, you know, we can open up the discussion to specifically Jet Synchron now, right? What happens if we ban Jet Synchron? The deck doesn't lose any. Well, the thing is, it does lose a lot of power. You could theoretically play like any other level 1 tuner. Shout out to Flan Belgard. So you can still have synchro engines as part of your thing. But I think banning the Jet Synchron is particularly, it's sort of in the same vein as playing through Nibiru. I find that like lines that play through Nibiru do tend to involve the Jet Synchron being used as an extender. So I think taking a little bit of power away from the synchro portion of the deck as well as the extension is a good way to hit it. But I think it's the best way to hit it without them hitting money cards, I think.
let me go through these two one by one, because I have a few things to say about Jet Synchron, but let me do the Ash first. So hitting Snake Eye Ash or limiting Snake Eye Ash was something that initially I was opposed to it because I thought it was just a consistency hit, right? And like I said earlier, I'm not the biggest fan of those. I wouldn't completely hate it, but like I'm not a big fan of consistency hits in general. But the more I thought about limiting Snake Eye Ash, the more to me it feels a little bit like the limiting Branded Fusion example that you mentioned earlier, because limiting Snake Eye Ash basically doesn't really stop the deck from getting to it, because the deck still has, you know, the Diabell Stars, the bonfires, and all that kind of stuff. But it has some implications, because if you have to go and search your Snake Eye Ash with those ways, there's two outcomes. Like if you go for it with Diabell Star, right? You have the Diabell Star for original to get to Snake Eye Ash. That is much more susceptible to Ash Blossom. And at the same time, this basically also completely cuts off your Jet Synchron access. Pretty much, because that the original Sinful Spoil, like we said earlier, that's the way you get to Jet Synchron, you get to Ponix, you get to whatever. If you have to use that card to get the Snake Eye Ash going, you're not doing any of that other stuff, right? And at that point, you're not just changing consistency, you're changing fundamentally what the deck does, because it just doesn't get to do the Fire King stuff on top or the Synchro stuff on top of what it already does with the Snake Eye Ash, right?
I'm really liking this Ash hit more and more you speak about it.
That is the one thing that I like about it. And the other thing is, if you have the bonfire for it, then you're just much weaker to draw than the deck would be, which I guess that's kind of like not always a positive, because just like, you know, makes people play more draw. But I think that's why I think limiting Ash is a more interesting hit than I thought at first glance. Because if they have to go, I'm not even sure if with one Snake Eye Ash I'm even still playing like Jet Synchron in my deck or whatever, because I'm like, okay, majority of the time I'm not going to be able to get original for it because I need to get Ash with that, right? And so I think that's interesting.
Plus, the card is sitting at a whopping 20 cents currently on the market, so I don't think anyone will feel too bad if they lost
that's definitely
their
one
Ash,
of the
right?
more realistic hits as well. That's why I put it to limited on my list as well, in my prediction / wish list, because the more I thought about it, the more I thought it made some sense. And it is one of the older cards. It's not the most expensive card, and it definitely, I can say that with certainty, that would not kill the deck. It would make it weaker to certain cards. It would make it more susceptible. It would make it less easy to splash those kind of other engines in it. Like, it's actually a hit that I quite like the more I think about it.
You know, just as a side note, I think, like, just from a design standpoint, I think it's just so annoying because I felt like there was so many, like, little things they could have done to this deck.
Yeah.
To make it, like, balanced, right? Like, I think, like, why does Oak bring back Banished guys? Why does Princess not require a fire? Like, all of these little things compounding together just make the deck incredible, right? And I feel it's frustrating
because... That is also specifically why it's so hard to hit, because it's just so good in so many different ways. That is like, you know, people are literally, this is the first time I've seen people mention, like, freaking ban Linkuriboh because of how freaking custom made that card seems for that deck. Like, the amount of crazy stuff you can do with Linkuriboh in that deck are just insane. The way how you make a Linkuriboh on turn 1 and it helps you dodge Valor and Imperm for the rest of your lifetime, and then, like, also the fact that you can, like, protect your SP, your Appaloosa with the Linkuriboh. Then you tribute your Poplar on the opponent's turn to make sure you have a Flamberge and the Spell Trap for the turn after. Like, the Linkuriboh is insane, right? And like, I don't know if banning that would even, I mean, if anything, it would make sense right now, if at any point. But like, it's so crazy to think that this deck makes people want Linkuriboh banned.
It's weird because I think, like, first of all, I just want to say I think that's a terrible ban. I don't think that's an issue. There's more, like, that is obviously very good reasons.
It's not the issue. I agree with you.
Yeah. But I think the problem with this is if they ban Linkuriboh, this opens up a big can of worms, right? Because now we're having the Link 1 discussion, right? I think is the problem with banning.
I mean, they
Linkuriboh.
banned Meowmoo.
Yeah, they did. What is that, 2 currently in Mass Duel, right?
I think it just came back to 2. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. It's interesting. The deck still isn't doing too much actually, which is kind of funny enough. But
Yeah.
yeah. So I think like banning Link Hero, like we did see a lot of people suggest this.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like the issue with the deck. It's obviously a huge power part of the deck, but it's also like it's weird because then you kind of like put this strange expiry date on Link Hero because it feels like okay, well we're gonna ban Link Hero. But then as soon as Snake Eye becomes banned in like a few months, well, you could just bring Link Karibo back.
Yeah, no, they should hit different stuff. Like Link Karibo is a good card, and Link Ones in general is something that I won't argue with you if you say Link Ones were a mistake. I do think to an extent that is true, but I don't think out of all things that this deck has, Link Karibo is the one that we should address or talk about.
Was there any other Snake Eye specific cards that we
there's
wanted
a
to
lot
talk
there's
about?
a lot of more. Like I think well, you said Jet Synchron earlier. I want to leave that for just like in a bit, but the other thing, and I think that's the last Snake Eye specific card I want to mention, and that is like, we've talked about Snake Eyes now, let's talk about Diabellstar real quick. Like, do we hit the Diabellstar cards? Actually, people are mentioning Oak as well. Banning Oak, I think, is interesting, but at the same time, I don't think it's as big of a hit that you guys think it is, because a lot of the lines, they work very fine without Oak, which maybe makes it an okay hit if you just ban Oak. At the same time, I'm looking at this abomination of a deck, and there's so many cards in it that do so much. And then I'm looking at Snake Eye Oak, which most of the time, like...
Listen, Josh, we're gonna get a Konami hit in Macedo, or a Macedo style hit, and they're gonna like limit Birch or something.
Oh yeah, they're limiting. No, they're limiting Oak, limiting Promethean,
limiting Oak, yeah.
Semi-limit Flamberge, limit Jet Synchron, limit Original Sinful Spoils, all the good stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Oak, I don't think... I genuinely think Oak is not that big of a deal, guys. Like, the card is good, don't get me wrong, but, like, there's other things that are more interesting. And, like, the turn 1 lines, most of the time, don't really require Oak.
Like, Oak is your grind game, and, like, Flamberge is just your grind game, right? Like, oh, no, I get to soul charge 3 monsters instead... sorry, 3 monsters instead of 4. It's like, okay, you know, like... I don't think it's that big of an issue.
Yeah. And so the other thing I wanted to talk about was Diabellstar,
Yep.
in which case I've said in the past, one thing I really like about the Diabellstar package is that it doesn't really come with hard engine requirements, right? Like, you can draw Diabellstar, Wanted, or Original Sinful Spoils. It's not like a Psyframe, Driver, and Gamma situation where like one card's really good and the other one is just terrible, right? Like, in those decks that play those cards, all 3 of them can technically work and be good draws, which I think is really cool card design. The fact that it doesn't have me put bricks in my deck. But one thing I realized...
I am so over, like, engine requirements.
No, I hate that. I hate that. I don't want that to happen anymore. So I was a fan of that until I realized, or like, I'm still a fan of it, but I did realize that whenever my opponent draws Wanted specifically, I just get mad for no reason. Because I'm like, they could have just had Diabellstar and they wouldn't get a draw later on for completely free, right? Like, it's the same thing as if they had drawn Diabellstar, but it draws a card. So the fact that that card is the exact same card as Diabellstar but draws a card makes me annoyed, because whenever my opponent draws Wanted, I'm like, why is that not Diabellstar? And whenever I draw Diabellstar, I'm like, why is that not Wanted? That's annoying, because that's the same card but it draws a card. And that's just randomly... basically what I'm trying to say is Diabellstar is fine, Wanted feels a little bit too powerful because it's just Diabellstar plus 1 draw. And I think it's that'd be a good way to hit the deck just slightly as well.
So you want to limit Wanted, or
yeah, something like that? I'd be fine wherever, like semi-limited, limited, whatever, because it also recycles too, right? Like, whenever you've entered like a more grindy game with the deck, the fact that Wanted just recycles your targets every turn basically is kind of obnoxious. So I'd be fine wherever. Like, it doesn't kill the deck at all. Like, whether you have 4 Diabellstars or 5 or 6, like, that's still viable no matter what. And like, it just gets the bonus draw less often, I think, and the recycling less often. I think that'd be cool.
Let's talk about like some of the other Snake Eye related hits. So we could talk a little bit about Fire Kings. Personally, I don't think this is worth talking about, but we should mention it. Some people have been suggesting hitting some Fire King cards. I don't think this is what we should do, and I think it's really sad to kill what was.
I mean, that's the outrageous thing there would be that, I mean, a lot of lists play most of the Fire King cards at literally 1 copy. So if you want to do any meaningful hit to that stuff, you have to ban a Fire King card like Ponix or something like that. the Fire King deck doesn't deserve that. Like the Fire King deck in itself is like completely fine, and hitting those cards, like it's just not. It's not
Well,
that. Nah, it's not called for.
Cries and Kirin. Yeah,
Definitely
the sins
not.
of the other pendulum decks were the ones abusing him, not Magus Vector. But yeah, that's kind of the problem, right? Is like you kill this like what is actually a cool deck as like a pure engine.
Yeah, no, Fire King is super dope, and like none of the cards, some of the cards are good, but none of them are problematic at all. It's actually phenomenal, I think, card design. Like the deck is really, really dope, and they should not hit any of those cards, I think.
I think Zelantis is such a cool card. This idea of a one material link 4 and the way it works is like really awesome. But it's such like you read that on your first time and you know like this is going to be a problem card, right? It resets soft ones per turn effects. And obviously what it does in Snake Eye is kind of ludicrous, right? But I think it's weird to hit it now.
I think this is a Link Rebo situation. I think this is the same as Link Rebo. Like the card is good.
It's a Link 4 Link Rebo. Yeah.
The card is good, but it's just not the problem. And the reason why it's so broken in that deck is because Promethean Princess just works off of it. Right? Like that is the thing, because Promethean Princess doesn't say when your opponent special summons, it says when a monster is summoned to your opponent's side of the field. That small thing, that small wording makes it so that Zelantis, instead of just doing nothing for the deck, does like 8,000 damage all the time. That's the...
It's weird.
Yeah.
It's strange because like I feel like this card will be a problem at some point, but there's like a million other like quote unquote future problem cards in the game that
people aren't even using it for the reason why it should be a problem, right? The broken thing about it is that it can like reset stuff that isn't once per turn and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't even matter in the Snake Eye deck. People aren't doing that.
Yeah. So one of these suggestions for, well, if we're pigeonholed into the situation where we have no way to get out of this financial or marketing strategy of the ban list, we can't hit our Snake Eye cards, we can't hit our new cards. There is a world where we bring back contenders for Snake Eye to balance out the format. So popularly, and
is this where you're gonna say Kid Kalos?
It's been on everyone's minds. Do we bring her back? Unvan Kid Kalos to 1 to... Because one way you kill tier 0 is you can kill the deck, the cards of the deck, or you bring back something else.
And you think the people that cried their eyes out over tier 0, tier limit, she's with tier 0, right? And now are crying their eyes out about Snake Eye tier 0 are gonna be happy if they join forces and together dominate Yu-Gi-Oh! And you can only play one of these two decks? Well, that's gonna make them happy?
I think that it's obviously a very, very controversial change. But I mean, you can see in the chat right now just how passionate
they're out
this
of their
is.
Minds. That is not what we need. We do not need another deck that is as broken as Snake Eyes.
I think it's never gonna happen. I would personally, I will say in my opinion, I would actually like it. I think that's actually a good hit. Or unhit, I suppose. But it's never going to happen. It will not happen.
On its own. I think unbanning Kid Kalos on its own is something that I guess maybe could happen. I haven't really thought about it in too much detail.
I don't think it will. Why would they bring back an old deck that isn't making money anymore? That's how I see it, right?
I guess that's
like genuinely
thing.
Like
but
that's the logic. Saying, that's like, why it won't happen.
Fundamentally, I don't agree with the idea of we are going to solve this problem not by hitting Snake Eye, but instead we're going to give you something back that is equally as broken. I don't think that's what people will like. Actually, I don't think that's the best way
I think it's definitely an angle, right? It is
an angle.
It's fighting fire with fire, right?
Oh,
I miss a good two deck format. When was the last like strictly 2-deck format? Has this been a while?
I mean, it's like a Sprite and Tier, I guess.
Sprite, yeah, okay. Sure, Josh. So what are we thinking, I guess, chat? Well, I mean, there's nothing really to say here. There's that this is always going to be something to debate and argue for hours at a time. But
yeah, I think we can use this as a good segue, because I think we've discussed most of or all of the relevant cards from the Snake Eye deck specifically. I was thinking, let's quickly talk about some of the other meta decks, and I want to have this one be relatively briefly, because genuinely this right now, I don't have an issue with any single like deck in the format being too powerful. Obviously, we have a tier 0 format where it's only really the fire deck, so I think it'd be kind of dumb to just hit like talk about voiceless voice hits right now or whatever, right? Like obviously you can argue if they hit Snake Eye really hard, we're gonna have other decks take the best deck spot, but I think all of them are fine. There's one particular thing that I also said in my own banlist discussion that I want to happen to other meta decks, and that is genuinely I want them to take away the puppet lock from branded. Either by banning Sanctifier or banning the puppet. I would rather see the Sanctifier ban because there's other cards that can replace the puppet. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with all of the decks conceptually. Like I wouldn't hit another deck in the format. I don't know if you have a different opinion, but yeah.
No, I thought even Airlifter last set was a bit absurd, right? Because we knew what was coming, right?
So yeah, no, we're gonna talk about reverting some of the other stuff too. Like I want to, I was saving that towards the end, but yeah, that's definitely.
It's just more so like you know, do we need to hit any other decks? Well, I don't even think they needed to do that last ban list. Never mind now. So what do we hit now? I mean, gosh, it's as long as it's like not problematic stuff. The most annoying thing is like problematic stuff. It's like branded locks, the puppets, and then we are going to talk about individual cards like the floodgates, like shifter and stuff. Like those are like the issues, right? Like outside of the current like meta game of Snake Eye, are the problem cards of the deck. So meta decks, I don't think anything needs hit. No. But we can probably go. Oh, I suppose archetype, specifically Fenrir. I hate Fenrir.
You hate Fenrir for some reason. I don't know.
What do you mean some reason?
But let me get this straight. Did I understand that correctly? That your argument for hitting Fenrir is that you always become dumb and misplay when it hits the board?
Anyway, so I think that this card just does so much and a lot by itself. That I think Kashtira players can just get to it through their Theosis. That's all they really need, right? You don't need to like just hard draw the Fenrir. It offers free discard fodder. It's a body. It's material. Like Fenrir doesn't need to be in the game anymore, or at least like limiting it. I think is good enough.
Didn't really answer my question there, but okay.
Yeah, go on. What's your next meta relevant hit?
No, I think we should talk about some general like individual cards that aren't like specifically bound to one deck. Those are everyone's favorite. I mean, obviously, I personally want Dimension Shifter as few as possible. I don't know, man. I don't know if they're gonna ban it, but I don't care. I'll take anything at this point.
I'll take two. Yeah,
that's the thing. That's
put it on the radar.
Normally, I've always said for the past like 2 years or whatever, how long I've been making content, I've always said like those cards need to be banned. But from the last ban list, seeing those kind of floodgates at one and just basically facing them so much less often, I'm just happy with that. And I'll take anything. I'll take one shifter. I'll take two. I don't care. And the same is true for the other floodgates. There's a couple floodgates that are as bannable as never before in the current format. I feel like specifically Summon Limit is a card that has always been annoying and popped up every now and then, but right now it is just the floodgate of choice. So I hope they see that and do the same thing. And I think cards like Anti-Spell Fragrance and Skill Drain should just follow suit to the other floodgates that they limited last ban list, because at least they're not
weird
gone.
Because like it's interesting you should mention Skill Drain. That is the fairest floodgate, quote unquote.
Unironically, yes. Like that is the
don't forget they brought it back recently, right? Like that's a weird thing, and this is like such a paradox. It's there's no other way to describe it. It's a paradox. They unlimit Skill Drain to 3, but then Goals in Rivalry Tika will go to 1. Like that doesn't really make sense to me. You know what I mean? I don't really get that. Because it's like you have a philosophy in your mind of how you want to address this ban list. Okay, so you know uninteractive cards like this should be hit. But then we're also going to bring back this one. It's so bizarre.
I think fundamentally they understand that a majority of the community doesn't like the gameplay they provide. However, I can't help but think that they do think that these cards should exist in some capacity, because they feel like there are people out there that need those kind of cards, right? Essentially, as weird as it sounds, right? They want people to have those kind of auto win buttons sometimes, because basically, the way we look at it is we always want the game to be as interactive as possible, and we want the better player to win and all that kind of good stuff, right? All that copium. But like in reality, if the better player always wins, you know, the worst player is never having fun, right? And so I think to an extent, They want those kind of things to exist, right? Which is also why I was happy to accept those cards being limited rather than at 3. Because yeah, it's not exactly what I want, but it's kind of like a middle ground thing that I can understand, right? And I just want the same thing to happen. I just want the same thing with Shifter and other floodgates.
If you want more information on this exact specific topic, you can check out our Floodgate podcast, where we dive into this exact specific subject on the concept of, cards existing for the sake of, what's the word? The less fortunate player who needs that carrot on the stick to be able to play the game, etc., etc. So that's why that exists to an extent.
Anyways, the last ban list gave me some hope that, they now see like, oh, that actually did do something. People are complaining way less about cards like Tikaboo and Rivalry and Gozen, even if they are still being played, right? Like they still exist. I still see tons of deck profiles running those cards, but it just feels more reasonable. Like even if you get hit by that one-off floodgate every once in a while, it's like whatever, like it doesn't happen that often. Most of the time, especially, it doesn't happen multiple times in the same match. That's sometimes even a bigger deal, right? Like when you go like game 1, lose to it, game 3, lose to it again. That's like something that's way less common when a card is limited. I'm just hoping they follow suit with some of the more common floodgates at the moment.
Yeah, one thing you didn't mention, it was more relevant last format, was Dimension Barrier. I think needs to go as well.
Yeah, I just feel like it's always the most reasonable to ask for the cards that are being played at the moment, right? Which is why I'm specifically looking at Shifter and Summon Limit at the moment. It feels kind of off if they hit like Dimensional Barrier right now. Like after it's been... This card ran rampant.
Oh, you want to talk about delayed hits? You want to talk about lagging? Don't forget, remember when Artifact Scythe was banned? That was like after Scythe format. Right.
Actually,
they banned
maybe
Scythe.
it's the most
they
reasonable.
do that.
Yeah. They do that.
They actually do that.
No,
so,
they do that.
You
Yeah. I was being too logical. My bad. Sorry, I take it back.
There is one unhit that, in terms of archetypes, that I forgot to mention that we've talked about. Well, I've talked about a lot. I want Kirin back. That needs to come back.
We're not even at the unbanned section yet, where you just couldn't hold that one back.
Well, that was the that goes into the previous category, because we were talking about bringing back some cards. In terms of meta contending threats, I don't think Kirin coming back is going to threaten Snake Eyes. Sadly,
Kirin should come back, and it would make sense. And they're probably going to do it way too late. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean that's the issue. These things happen so late. Like that's the problem, right? I mean, look at Harp Horror, right? Like we can probably all assume that card is going to get bumped up to 2 or 3 in the next list, irrespective of what other changes happen. Because
I think secretly, the unfortunate truth is that sometimes they don't actually want these cards to be good again. They don't want to bring them out right at the right time when they would be just fair enough, but still good enough to see play, right? Because then, like, what do they gain when someone picks up an Orcus deck from 2019 again, realistically, especially when it's a big part of the community, right? Like realistically, it's unfortunate, but if you really think about it, it makes more sense for them to bring those cards back when it's slightly too late.
Yeah, I get that. But at the same time, like my dreams were shattered when it didn't come back in the last list, because it made sense to line up with Phantom Nightmare's Magispector support.
Yeah, exactly.
And they just didn't bring it back. And
yeah, oh no, in that situation, I don't even understand it, because that could help boost like current sales, right? Because people would be like, okay, that gets support now. Kirin is back now. Let's pick up those cards. But that I don't have an explanation for that. That doesn't make sense at all to me.
So if they were going to do it last lists, there's potentially one more chance in the next list because of the lag example that we gave. So the next list, if Kirin isn't in the next list, I give up.
Copium.
Should we talk about cards like Sharvara and such?
Give me one more take. I'm tired of seeing Baron in every end board, and the same is true for Appaloosa.
I feel like this is an extra deck discussion that we were going to do, right? Like this is a fundamental problem with the extra deck as a thing, right? So we don't want to talk about this too long. For you guys who are interested, there will be a dedicated podcast specifically on the extra deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! And this is going to be a huge topic.
It's worth pointing out though that like I mentioned this during my own banlist discussion a couple days ago, and then people in chat immediately told me they don't think Appaloosa is going to happen because it's in Rarity Collection 2, which is unfortunate from a game design perspective, but probably true.
Yeah, That's a good point. It's become quite an iconic Link monster, I feel like, in Konami's eyes, you know? They're making an alt art for it and stuff like that, so it's weird.
I
But these are like
also
just such bannable cards, you
I
know?
don't really think it's gonna happen, but I am quite annoyed by both Appaloosa and Baron. Just like not only being phenomenal endboard pieces, but also just like ruining your ability to like hand trap the opponent. I don't know.
Apollosa, Baron, Savage, like that. It's the same
Yeah.
like 3 cards that have been there in every single Lithium replay. You know what I mean? Like those are the ones that are just there every single like time there's a new deck. It just abuses these generic boss monsters that are relatively easy to get to. If your deck has a tuner, it likely makes an 8. If you can spam bodies, you can make a Link
I mean,
4.
Savage is I probably okay. I think Savage only pops up.
It's the more like specific one, I guess.
It
Yeah.
pops up way more rarely than Baron and Apple because it needs Link monsters in the graveyard too before being summoned. Like I think I'm fine with Savage.
I think the one that people have actually been genuinely suggesting quite a lot of is IP or SP.
Yeah, that's cap.
I don't think it's happening, but
I think like SP out of all the extra deck staples is like one of my favorite ones. I think the gameplay that SP provides is like super cool. I like that card.
I think
and
people
IP
forget how
Masquerena,
cool it is to play with SP going second. That's why that card is really fun, I think.
I mean, it's good going first and going second. Like I think SP's I think SP's cool. The price point I think is what people are more mad about SP, but I think that's a different discussion.
I think people are just kind of like annoyed at like the IP SP interaction because we went from like -1 to like spin a card, which is like, you know, at least you're losing a card.
IP Masquerena is
now you're making a banish and like a guy that offers protection and also just banishes again. Like it's kind of ridiculous.
So, I mean,
just summon on your
ability. I guess maybe I can get behind that. Like the fact that like SP is in my opinion fine, but maybe the fact that you can make it on your opponent's turn using IP
that's kind of
puts
the
it
issue,
over the top. You know what I mean? So maybe I wouldn't hate banning IP Masquerena the more I think about it, but I also don't think it's that realistic. But I think that would be an okay hit. I would rather keep SP than IP. Because I think SP is a cool card, but I can definitely see the argument of it's too powerful if you can summon it onto the opponent's turn.
I think it's one of just those one of those cards that's like way more interesting because it isn't just like, you know, say the line once per turn, negate, right? Like that's the difference between things like SP and Baron.
Yeah.
So it's just fundamentally just more interesting card design.
I think the biggest difference fundamentally is that SP Little Knight is almost better at going second than it is at going first, which I always kind of like those extra deck monsters a lot that do that, because you don't have to hard draw those kind of cards to help you go second. Like, you know, the Typhon and the SP Little Knight, like those were two of my favorite additions to like extra decks after Age of Overlord, because they just make going second more balanced because you have those amazing removal tools at your disposal that you don't need to draw into or anything. They're always there, right? And I think that's pretty cool.
Do you want me to give you like an absolute nuclear take?
Sure.
Typhon shouldn't have been a summon restriction on it. Like they should have just not put that on there.
Just make it whenever you want.
Yeah, like that would make going second insane.
I wouldn't even hate it. Like I'm a big fan of those cards, like Zeus, Typhon, SP Little Knight. I think everything that makes going second easier or more realistic, rather, with just engine, without being absurdly broken, I think is cool in my book. I don't know if Typhon would be too strong then, but
I think if you remove the floodgate effect of it, I would be happy with it just not restricting your summons. Because
so
then you could
just
like summon Typhon, you could like
the
bounce
same
a thing and then keep playing.
though, right? The same summoning condition.
Yeah.
But
yeah, exactly.
you can still summon for the rest of the turn. It'd be interesting
be really
for sure.
Cool.
It'd be very, very strong.
Exactly, and I think like going second needs that kind of shake up at some point.
Yeah.
Anyway, sidetrack and tangent aside, are we discussing the clutter cards?
Yeah, I guess that I think that's all the things that I would like to see changed, summarized. You know, that's the thing that I think.
You want to see some dangers come back?
Dangers?
Yeah,
probably fine. Yeah, there's so many stuff. There's so much stuff on this list that can come off no problem. I guess we just mentioned one. We alternate. I'll start with Dragon Rulers.
Like 1 or like 3?
All of them.
Like all of them to
All
3?
of them.
Yeah. I mean, what's the issue, right? Like we saw it in Masu. That was the testing ground.
There is no
They have
issue. It does
Tomahawk.
nothing. Like legit, it does nothing.
The 2 quote-unquote problematic cards for Dragon Rulers are all banned in TCG. Magic Dragon's banned, Auradon is banned, and Tomahawk is banned.
Yeah,
So
there's
like
no shot.
like unless you literally just want to play a 2013 deck, then you know.
No.
Gosh, you put me on the spot now. Well, listen, I might as well get it out. Get it off my chest now. Unlock the block,
Oh,
baby.
come on, dude. Nah.
Block Dragon back to 1.
That's not what I meant. I said alternating. I meant good takes.
I think that if I refuse to live in a world where Flamberge gets to stay at 1, but Block Dragon is banned, hell no. A little bit more realistically, what do you think about Electromite?
Realistically, probably fine, but I don't want to risk it. There are certain cards that just promote a certain type of deck that I just don't like. I'm not a fan of pendulum combo piles, and even though it probably wouldn't be good, I don't want to risk it. Like I'm just not a fan of the pendulum mechanic, how it's being used nowadays. So
I like a bunch of other pendulum tools to come back more so than Electromite, because I think Electromite is just too generic and just offers too much in what it like really does by itself. But the question is like, would it even be a meta threat? Like that's really what it comes out.
I mean, I think it just goes into the pile of, hey, there's already like 10 other decks of I go first and I win, I go second and I lose. Like, you know, the Monadiums of this world and whatever else there is, right?
You know what's really funny? It's like also in a timeline where like Princess exists, and I feel like Princess is just one of those cards like Apollosa where I just think it's really strong, but maybe not ban worthy, or at least like Konami isn't going to ban it. I feel like, and so as long as Princess exists, like Electromite is just even more powerful, which is like really funny
because one of the effects is not even once per turn, right?
You can bring back Electromite and then like pop again. It's
yeah, no,
it's
I'd rather
crazy.
not. I'd rather not risk it, honestly.
But that's the thing, though. Like, look at Macedo. Like, the card deck like doesn't do anything. So I don't know.
Yeah, like I said, it probably wouldn't be like tier 1 threat, insane. You have to play against it all the time. But it's just like if the 2 possible outcomes are deck is irrelevant or deck annoys me, then I don't want it back. You know. I'd rather not risk it. I'd rather just not have it be there.
Yeah, there's not like a lot of like fair cards remaining on the ban list. I think like some of the easier ones to maybe discuss is probably Zodiac.
Dryden absolutely can come off the ban list.
Yeah, that deck is basically like full power in Macedo, obviously minus Broad Bull. I think like we could easily just get Dryden and Barrage to 3.
100%, 100%, no problem. There's so many things like, and it's not even just the banned cards. It's just like the Zodiacs could definitely come back. We look at limited where we have like Harp Horror is limited, right? That could definitely go to 3. We have, I think Sharvara is something that they should revert as soon as possible. Even though some people have voiced their concerns with like the Fiendsmith support coming later, that has some crazy level 6 synergy with Fiends, which I guess could be true, but at the same time, I think like Sharvara being limited was just, I think it was a mistake. It seemed reasonable at the time, but knowing what was about to happen, like it was just over the top. Red Rose Dragon, like cards like that, you know, we still have stuff left from Halka Fibrax times that is still on the ban list, even though Halka's been banned forever. The
ban list does kind of need like a cleanup, I feel like.
I think so.
There's a lot of just really just, I don't know, cards that just shouldn't really be there.
Yeah.
I feel like Ronin Totem really shouldn't be there either.
I'm not gonna debate you on that. That is,
dude, low key, like I am a frog enjoyer. Like that paleo deck was really fun.
Yeah.
But it's like it's just sad now, right? Like in Macedo, you can't really play it because there's no toads, and in TCG you can't play it because it's too hard to make toads. It's weird.
It's sad. Yeah. Ronin Totem, it still is to this day the worst trait that they have ever offered. The fact that they gave us Substitute and took Ronin is just a criminal offense.
That's the wrong type of substitution we want.
That is not what. No. Like they can take away the Substitute again if they are afraid of us looping it with Ronin Totem or whatever. But like, please give back my Ronin Totem. Naturia
Yeah.
Sacred Tree is another one. You know, let me just go Hugin discard Sacred Tree, please. And
I
now
understand that
that's our runic mention for the podcast out of the way. There we go.
Oh, got him.
Almost forgot about that.
I'm gonna be honest, like some of my favorite, most just my most favorite cards in Yu-Gi-Oh. And I'll just admit to being like a hypocrite, but like I just love these cards, and I would just love to see Magic Dragon back. Like it's not gonna happen because they just did it. You know, I love that card.
I mean, it's understandable though, right? Sometimes you just have those cards that are really, really powerful or broken, but you just like them, you know?
Yeah,
That's
like
alright.
I understand Block Dragon's pretty crazy, but I
Yeah.
would just love to play Adamantipator again. I would love to play with Grass again. These are the kind of cards like I really enjoyed on the ban list, you know. Oh, there's an interesting suggestion actually, Masterpiece.
I don't think it's that interesting, to be honest. Like I think yes, it could come back. Probably.
I just don't like the design of Masterpiece. I just don't like, because I think it's one of those, like, what is the word, like time immune cards. Like you can't power creep being immune to monster effects, right? Because the game will always have like monsters, right? So
I mean,
I think it's just
you
one of
can't
those
power
like
creep it though. Like I mean, they made stuff like Goddess.
It's true, I guess.
That is a power creep to unaffected cards, right? There's like a lot of tools that we didn't have back then, like freaking Daruma Karma Cannon or whatever.
But in general, I just think it's like really, I just don't think it's like cool or interesting.
It's not a cool card.
Right?
That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't think Masterpiece is a card that I look at and I'm like, yeah, that's really cool. That is going to, like, you know, make the game so much cooler if it came back or whatever. But I can't argue with the fact that I don't think it would be powerful enough or even too powerful. Like it's not a cool card, but does it deserve to be on the ban list at this point? Probably not anymore.
Oh, a very interesting card that people have talked about a few times is Talents. I don't know how I feel about Talents. There's nothing more satisfying than having a way to play through hand traps. Your opponent like ashes some duty cards, and you're just like, okay, show me, caught, show me them hands. Take out another hand trap, and then keep playing. Like, oh, this like. But the thing is, like, when that happens, like, it's just game over. Like, it's actually game over.
Yeah, I like Talents a lot going second. I hate Talents going first. Essentially.
It's weird. Yeah, that's actually weird, right? It's so good going second, and it's actually pretty fair. But like, yeah, going first, it can be really toxic. But it's also one of those like super frustrating things, right? Because I don't know if I'm just unlucky.
The thing about Talents, the thing that ends up happening with Talents is I find it really cool in formats that aren't Giga hand trap heavy, right? But whenever a deck is popular or whenever a format happens that promotes heavy hand trap usage, like the current one, I find Talents to be really obnoxious. And so from my perspective, it's more like they should fix this sort of hand trap format situation that we have rather than taking Talents away. Because if they solve the issue of people have to play 15 hand traps to compete, and that makes Talents broken. If they solve that situation, then Talents gets way less obnoxious. Because people don't always play 20 hand traps in their decks, right? Like, that's not a thing. Like, we have literally not even, like, what is it, 4 months ago or whatever, people were playing Unchained with, like, 0 hand traps and stuff like that. And in those kind of formats, like, Talents wasn't as big of a deal. And I just think they should promote that more. Like, they should make more cards that are, or more decks that promote not as hand trap heavy formats, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big open discussion, but I think some of the most enjoyable Yu-Gi-Oh! Is when you're just, you know, dueling like pound for pound, engine for engine, and trading in that way. Because generally, like, you know, sometimes so much of the game, sometimes, especially recently, it just feels like we're designing or like we're going in directions of like, okay, how can I come up with a side plan or an engine or a combo that is designed to make you play as little as possible, right? Which is why we've seen so many people including anti-spell over the years, side decking into summon limit. It's pretty frustrating.
Yeah.
All right. We're taking some Q&A from the Twitch chat now. So
yeah, because I think we're about done with what needs to be talked about. I mean, there's like thousands of cards, tens of thousands of cards. So there's always more to talk about. Well, we can collect some quick Twitch chat questions. I think I've talked about most of the things or all the things that I wanted to talk about for the current format. Obviously, there's more, but
yeah. There's a couple of things here. Okay, so this one's interesting. Okay, how about instead of Kick Colossus, like just a couple of names? Maybe put Shire into two,
I
something like that.
personally, realistically, never had an issue with tier limits until Ishizu cards. So I don't know how much I would hate it, honestly. Like even something like bringing back Kikkolos or bringing back a couple of tier limit names, I never had a problem with it until Agido and Kelbeck, pretty much. So maybe okay, I don't know.
Engage the 3.
I think that'd be fine.
Did you want to mention something about Jet Synchron, by the way? We did kind of go over it.
I mean, yeah, I was kind of including it in the talk of I wanted to mention it during Baron and Appaloosa because I think Jet Synchron is one of the culprits of being able to play around all of your opponent's hand traps in Snake Eyes specifically. Like I thought about that. If they do something like limit Flamberge, ban Jet, and ban Appaloosa, then the deck just literally cannot like play around Nibiru anymore, and that would be an interesting way to balance it. Well, no.
All right. I have some ideas.
How about we just answer these chat questions rapid fire? Read one card, say yes or no. Alternate.
All right. Mystic Mine to 1. No.
Unbanned Circular. No.
Elf. Ooh, no. I thought about it for a second.
Verte. No.
The hell's your problem with Verte? Where's Dragoon, Konami? Bring him back. Glow Up Bulb. Pfft, cards flip flop up and down like so much. Sure, why not? Yeah.
What do we have? Ban terraforming. No, I think I'm fine with terraforming.
Oh, Colossus. Okay, that'll be the send-off. That's the last final discussion point. It's like we're almost there with toss format. It's just about cycled back here. All 3 or 4 of those archetypes are basically, they've returned now. As the Twitch chat prediction video I did where I had guests on, to quote, Protoss is a bad floodgate. Colossus is a good floodgate. What's your thoughts?
Good floodgate.
So
now what do you mean by this?
Colossus? I don't know. Who knows what they're cooking down there? But it's weird though, because like that card is just I don't think has ever been relevant in Master Duel. Right? Was there ever like a particular deck that really like
No, realistically it probably wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Like it's a very, very specific summoning condition, you know? A Thunder after activating a card in hand. Like the only real way to do that is with like Cupid Pitch for Nemesis Corridor.
I unironically don't think it's that big of a problem if there's a floodgate monster that only one very specific deck has access to. It can be very annoying, but like the fact that like you're playing Thunder Dragon and that card just isn't very good, or that deck isn't very good, so you have at least the benefit of having that card. I don't like Colossus, but I wouldn't hate if they gave Thunder Dragon back a tool like that.
All right, Colossus to 1, quote Joshua Schmidt. You heard it here there, ladies and gentlemen. That's a perfect way to round off here. We've taken a long time, unfortunately, to get together some more community-based things for you guys, but let us know what you think about a Patreon-specific Discord, because that's something I've been floating in my mind so that we can maybe interact and chat.
Oh yeah, we've been lacking on that regard.
With all things regarding the Heart of the Cast content, we've developed a lot of a very passionate community about this podcast, and hopefully there'll be plenty more episodes to come. Even just by the end of the year, if you really think about it, there'll be like another 40-ish episodes. So lots of room to talk about, lots of room for feedback, lots of room for guests. So I think what I will personally make it a thing to do is try and create a Discord together for people who are interested in joining and giving us ideas. And of course, we would love to take Patreon questions as well at the end of each episode. So that's something to look out for in the future.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I think is enough for us to wrap up with today.
Yeah, hope you enjoyed the episode, everybody. Thanks for tuning in as always. And you guys can hear more from us next week. Bye-bye, everyone.
Take care. We don't have exact topic yet, but we'll cook up something nice for you. So yeah, peace out. Have a great evening and see you later.